where I'll be posting the links just in case you don't get the stuff from Meetup. Um, so more people from Canada, which I just always enjoy the people from Canada. So thank you very much for showing up. I appreciate it. And let's see, what time is it? It's 6:05. So let's get started. Feel free to keep chiming in. We've got good amount of people so far, so that's great. I wanted to let you know that I'm traveling. Not sure why I'm letting you know, but just we're have a nice relationship here. I thought I would share. So I'm traveling. I'm driving from Florida to California, and right now I am in New Orleans, and I'll be here for a couple days and then I'll be traveling through Texas. So next week, I think I'll be coming to you from Austin, and then I believe El Paso. It's going to take me about 10 days to go through Texas, obviously slowly because I'll be stopping and stuff. Um, so, okay, so that's that. If you have, again, if you have questions, submit them through the Q&A. Otherwise, let's get started. So we're going to talk tonight about self-care because, well, I think self-care is one of the most important things you could possibly do for yourself, and particularly for people who are um, healing from difficult childhoods, difficult experiences, self-care is even more important. But frankly, even people who grew up in a relatively healthy environment, life is pretty hectic and stressful and chaotic, and we need self-care to be able to take care of ourselves. So let me start by telling you a little bit more about who I am. So I'm Jeremy Schneider. I run a company called Build on Your Strengths. And my goal is I want to help people build a mental health portfolio. So, the way that I approach mental health is that most of us have some sort of past that we're dealing with, and that past ends up impacting our present in ways that we may not even be aware of, but often we find frustrating and uh, an obstacle in the way of getting to where we want to go in life. I like to be able to help people with that. And so I'll teach you new ways to be able to deal with that. I'll help you see how that's happening. And then I'll teach you practical tools to be able to deal with that. I think of that as a mental health portfolio. And because I think what you need is you need an array of options to be able to help yourself. And that's what I try to do in all of my workshops. So I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, but for instance, next week's workshop is talking a lot about self-awareness and self-compassion and why those are the two most important things that you could possibly develop in yourself for your healing process. So I'm a licensed master social worker. I'm a family therapist. I'm a certified life coach. I've published a book called Fatherhood in 40-Minute Snapshots, which is my experience of being a dad to twins. I have twins. They're now adults, and which is why I can, travel a little bit more. But back when they were not adults, I was writing every day on my train ride, which was 40 minutes into the city when I left them each morning. And I just wrote about them for years. And I took some of the best pieces and I put them together in a book called Fatherhood in 40-Minute Snapshots because each article was written on that 40-minute train ride going into the city. My memoir, which is called In My Rearview Mirror, is going to be coming out in like 3 to 4 months, 5 months, depending on how smoothly I get through this travel period. And so I'm really excited to be sharing that with you, particularly those of you who have been to a few of my workshops. I really think you'll find that to be a pretty intense, valuable read. Plus, it'll give you a chance to get to know me a little bit better if that is something that interests you. And most of you know I do workshops on self-care and self-awareness and self-compassion and overcoming trauma. I also do some work around AI and mental health, including a Psychology Today column where I write about that a lot. I'll tell you about the mental health starter pack later on, but it's a series of free guides that are for you. So let's start with my basic premise on how to help you understand why self-care is important. And what I want you to think about is imagine that you wake up every day wearing a backpack. You just wake up, you have this backpack on, no one else can see it, you can barely see it. But as you go through the day, every interaction that you have, whether that's something happens in your morning commute, whether your boss says something obnoxious to you, whether you have a trouble with a child or a spouse or another family member, whether you have already existing past traumas that you're trying to deal with, all of those add weights to your backpack. The problem is, it's not like someone hands you that weight and you're like, oh, this is heavy. Let me put it in my backpack. It's like it gets put into your backpack without you even being aware of it. And that's the challenge because by the end of the day, you're starting to feel weighed down, but you don't understand why. And then you go to bed and maybe you have trouble going to sleep because you are so weighed down. And then you get up in the morning and you got to put that backpack back on and you're wondering, why am I still so tired? And it's because these weights are literally just dragging you down. You're carrying so much every day, and it takes a toll on you. And so, what we're going to spend tonight really focusing on is what you can do to begin to open up this backpack and really assess what are these weights about and what can I do about them so I don't need to carry them with me anymore. The key being, of course, that the backpack doesn't empty itself, right? We need to take action. We need to be intentional with our efforts to free ourselves from these weights that we've been carrying around. And that's what self-care is, right? So self-care is the act of removing these weights. It's the intentional practice of doing that. And the reason I keep using the word intentional is because you may be doing things in your life that help you, but if you do them with intention, meaning conscious effort and knowledge that this is going to help you feel better, it will have a better impact on you as well. Self-care is not just about when things have gotten so bad that you can't deal with it anymore. Self-care is also something you can do on a preventative maintenance stretch. So I'm doing self-care every day. I don't care how good or bad my day was. I am always doing some self-care activities every day. Now, again, that's partly because I also had a difficult childhood. I know that that is weight already in my backpack, so it doesn't take as much weight during the day to affect me. But so self-care is what you're doing on a regular basis. And then the one thing you really want to think about, and I'll touch on this in a little bit, is that if you don't have to do an hour or 2 hours a day, you want to just be doing a little bit every day. And later on, we're actually going to go through specific practices you can do. We'll do them together here, and then you can use them whenever you'd like. And so hopefully that will kind of help build your self-care portfolio. I want you to think about that. I think too many people really struggle with the idea that self-care is essentially another weight that they must do. It's an obligation. It's like, oh, I should also do something for myself, but like I don't feel it, right? When we're feeling that way, that's not self-care, right? That's just adding another weight to our backpack, and that's too much for us to deal with. So the way I like to think about it is integrating the idea of self-care throughout your day. That doesn't necessarily mean like everything you do is self-care, but if we are thinking about your day, right, we want to be able to find moments throughout your day where you can do even a couple minutes of some self-care activity that helps you begin to even take a small weight out. Because any little bit that you feel lighter is a little bit that you're going to feel a little bit better, and everything else in your life is going to feel a little bit easier to deal with. The biggest question that you could keep asking yourself is, what do I need now? So we don't want to do self-care just when things fall apart, right? We want to do them on a maintenance basis, on a regular basis, on a consistent basis. We want to incorporate these small moments throughout the day. We want to do it so that it's not additional pressure, right? Like if you want to go exercise and you need 45 minutes to exercise, great. And you have that 45 minutes, go ahead and do it. But if you need to do a self-care activity and you don't have an extra hour, I would rather you do 2 minutes of self-care than not do any. Something is always better than nothing when it comes to self-care. And frankly, anything that involves caring for our mental health, something, even if it's small, is always better than nothing. The other way that I think about self-care is that integrating it versus like an obligation, right? Integrating it throughout your day into activities you are already doing. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, well, if I need to go do this, can I do that in a way that also adds a self-care component? A simple example is, if there are two ways to drive home and one of them involves going on a highway and one of them involves maybe being 5 to 10 minutes longer, but lets you go through trees and a little bit of nature, like maybe at least some days you go through the nature because that's going to have a positive effect on you and will help you feel a little bit better. A personalized approach. So I'm going to give you a lot of examples of things that I do, but I don't want you to feel like that those are requirements in any way, right? What works for me works for me. And what at the very least, what I hope is by sharing what works for me, that it may give you ideas for similar things that might work for you. So if I talk about something that is really helpful to me, I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm saying, hey, here's an idea. Is there something similar for you that would also work in that way? And maybe what you choose wouldn't work for me. And who cares, right? As long as it works for you, that's what really matters. All of this is about shifting the way we think about self-care because I don't want self-care to feel like an obligation for you. I want self-care to feel like an opportunity for you. And I'll give you a simple example. So I've been traveling and I'm, staying in new places and it's a bit chaotic. And I was working out of my hotel room today and I realized it was like 4 o'clock and I hadn't gotten out of the hotel. I was in meetings and meetings and meetings. And so I realized I needed to do something. And my first thought was, right, I did well, what do I need now? And I'm in New Orleans. And I thought to myself, I need water. I always need water. Water. I love water. It always feel better around water. I had never seen the Mississippi River. So I took a walk to the Mississippi River and I looked at it for a few minutes and I just felt so much better. And then I came back and hopefully this workshop will work out really well. And part of that will be because I was able to take a moment and think about, well, what do I need? Oh, I need water. I need to get away. I need to let my mind just, and one of the ways that I do that is by going to see water. So that's kind of how I want to help you think about self-care today. So this is an interesting one. I know a lot of people think about self-care as kind of this selfish thing, especially if you're a parent and caretaking for children or even caretaking for your own parents or other family members. The idea that self-care is selfish can be really strong or self-indulgent or something like that. And I just want you to think for a second about what breathing is like, right? Every time you breathe, you're breathing in oxygen that someone else could breathe, and you're breathing out carbon dioxide, which no one else can breathe. Would never for a second think about breathing as being selfish, but technically, we're exhaling something that's poisonous to the people around us. And we're totally cool with that. And that's because it doesn't really matter. But the idea is that we've accepted that breathing is important because breathing is a requirement for living. Well, self-care doesn't cause anybody else harm. It doesn't introduce any sort of toxic uh, gases into the air, but we have such a hard time with it. And so, if you can start to think about self-care very similar to the way of breathing, I think you'll find that doing things that involve self-care will be easier for you to do. And that's really how I think about it. It's not like I walked out of here at 4 o'clock or whatever and thought, I have all of these things that I should do. What do I choose? I was like, I need to do something for myself. I need to be okay for this workshop. The way that I do that is some self-care activity. In this case, that self-care activity was going to see the water, seeing the Mississippi River for the first time in my life, which actually was kind of cool. So I hope that that makes sense to you. Self-care is really as important as breathing if you want to live a more joyful, happy, satisfied life. And that's what I want for you. And I think that's what you want for yourself. That's why we're all here together, right? From all these different places around the world. The other thing about self-care, right, is that you can't pour from an empty cup, right? It's that same idea of, when you're on an airplane, they tell you to put on the oxygen mask first before you do that for your children, right? Like we need to care for ourselves first because that allows us to better care for ourselves, but also for the people that we really care about and that we love. And so we need to get into that habit of self-care is the driver behind me being the way that I want to be. I can give more on this workshop tonight because I already took care of myself earlier. I hope that makes sense. So there's two, excuse me, there's two key criteria. Sorry. There's two key criteria that I would like you to think about when it comes to determining what constitutes self-care. The first is, and this is one of my favorite lines that I came up with like 30 years ago. Self-care is time unencumbered by the wants and needs of others. We spend so much of our day focusing on what other people want and need from us, especially if we're parents or caretakers for other family members, right? We're allowed to have time where we just focus on our own wants and needs. So that's a big part of what self-care is, right? I didn't go to the water tonight because I thought someone else would want me to. I didn't go to the water because I thought if I took this picture and I sent it to someone that they would feel better about me or whatever it is, right? I went because it's it's good for me. I feel good, right? The other component, and you can see how this plays out here too, most of us live in a world where our nervous system is overactivated. Too many of us are spending time in fight or flight mode, constantly assessing the risk because of the way that we live our lives, which is so hectic and crazy and moving from one thing to another to another. We're essentially convincing our nervous system that we're at risk and then wondering why we can't calm down when it's time to go to sleep at night. It's because we've told our brain it's danger, danger, danger. And so a big part of self-care is helping to tone down that switch, to turn down that switch of fight or flight mode, to help our nervous system be less activated, which would then allow us to feel a little bit more calmer and more at peace. So that doesn't mean things like exercise, which can get you excited, are bad, because of course exercise is good. But there's an active exercise, right? That most people find something about exercise that is like soothing for the brain, that's calming, that helps them really focus more clearly, right? That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. I will sometimes take breaks from doing work and I'll do word puzzles. Those word puzzles, you don't necessarily define them as self-care, but the way that I do it by setting aside time, by sitting away from my computer and just focusing solely on these word puzzles, and doing them and feeling some sense of pride when I accomplish them and some sense of frustration when I don't. But, you know, that's when I use self-compassion. But that the idea that that helps my brain focus clearly on one thing, but also lets everything else fall by the wayside, which allows a good part of my brain to just, and that's what we just need so much more of, is being able to take these breaths, right? To be able to slow our nervous system down. So again, we want that time to be focused on you and you alone, unencumbered by the wants and needs of others. And we want it to be something that helps slow down your nervous system, that helps remind that you're safe, reminds it that it doesn't need to be switched on into fight or flight mode. So some questions to think about are like, am I doing this for me? Does this help me get settled? Does it help put me in a zone, right? Doing a jigsaw puzzle, you may not think about as a self-care activity, but when you're focused on a puzzle, a lot of the world just falls away. And that allows your brain to calm down. It feels a sense of safety when we're just focusing on one thing at a time. And that's a nice way of saying to your brain, hey, let's turn off that fight or flight switch. So you don't want to be multitasking when you're doing self-care. There's like some exceptions to that, which I'll get to, but I don't mean to confuse things. Really, like if you're doing multiple things at a time, then you're not doing self-care. If you're stretching while you're brushing your teeth, for instance, that's fine because you're focused on the process of stretching while you're brushing your teeth. I'll get to that later. And there's nothing wrong with multitasking, but just don't confuse that with self-care is all. So I want to be able to help you think about kind of what is already weighing you down right now. You probably came here tonight feeling weighed down from your day to some extent. And you may already feel weighed down from the week, right? Some of us feel weighed down from our life, just in general, right? So I want you to just take a few moments and think about what feels particularly heavy in your backpack right now. What are some of the things that you've done, some of the situations that you've been in, the experiences that you're dealing with that have been draining you, that have been weighing you down? And then I really want you to start thinking about a few things that give you an emotional boost, that help you feel better. I don't mean distract you. I don't mean that kind of make you forget what's going on. I mean that sort of genuinely internally helps you feel better. And we'll go through some examples of those. And another important thing to think about is, how does your approach to self-care differ when life feels like it's going well versus when life feels like it's not going so well? The thing I want to touch on this fourth point, and this is something I really like to help people understand, our self-care activities need to be proportionate to the weights that we are carrying. And so what I mean by that is, if we're having a good week and we spend 5 minutes a day, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there, 1 minute there, focusing on breathing exercises, that may be enough to keep us okay. That may be enough to remind our nervous system that it's okay to slow down. But if you have a huge deadline coming up, if one of your kids is sick, if you're worried about financial situations, then 5 minutes a day of breathing exercises is not going to be enough to help your nervous system calm down. And that's what I mean. The heavier the weights that you're carrying, the more self-care activities you need to be doing. They need to be proportionate to each other. Otherwise, you'll do self-care activities and it won't make a difference in terms of the weights you're carrying. And then you won't continue to do the self-care activities because it doesn't feel like they're making any difference. When they are making a difference, it's what you're dealing with is so much more now that you actually need more self-care to really care for yourself. So I really want to talk about the two different modes, let's say, of self-care. So there are lots of things that you can do for self-care, but they usually all break down into two different activities. One, regulation, one, restoration. So again, as an example, tonight, when I got off my last call and realized, oh, I have my workshop in less than 2 hours, I need to help myself. I didn't need regulation. I wasn't activated. I needed restoration. I was depleted. I needed to do something that would infuse me, right? And like really just breathe in the goodness and excitement and interest and joy and whatever it was because I'd kind of run out today. So again, for me, right, that's going to the water. But that's a good example. In my mind, I thought regulation, restoration. Oh, I need restoration. Okay. If I need restoration, then this is the activity I'm going to do. So, regulation is what you probably often experience, which is the hecticness of running around. You're taking kids here, you're doing this activity, you go from one meeting to another meeting to another meeting. All you're doing is just this constant moving around, and you're completing this task and that task and this task and that, and it's just so much. And then at the end of the day, you have this other thing, and you made a promise to a friend you were going to take care of this, right? When you're activated like that, your nervous system is operating at that high speed that's overactivated. The kind of self-care you need is regulation. Regulation helps you when you're revved up. Those are the kinds of things that are going to help you calm down. It's going to help remind your nervous system that you're safe. It's going to help remind your nervous system that it doesn't need to be in fight or flight mode. And that's the kind of stuff that really helps you be able to work on that. Restoration, as I touched on, is really when you're just depleted, right? When you're just wiped out. It's not just about getting sleep, though obviously that's important, but it's also about like how do you recharge? How do you fill yourself back up with something good? For me, that is almost always going to be nature. Nature and wildlife. If I can go see some birds or go see some water or some other wildlife, I'm going to feel better afterwards and I'm going to have more energy for the rest of my day. So when you're really beginning to think about self-care, these are the two things that's the best way to start. And I think it's really important. Most people do self-care activities, but it's not matched with how they're feeling. So you could be doing something that's restorative, but if you need regulation, it's not that helpful and vice versa. So, right, like if I had done breathing exercises when I walked out, that wouldn't have helped me feel better. I might have been calm, but I wasn't activated, so I didn't need to be calmer. I needed an infusion of goodness. And breathing exercises aren't going to help me with that. So, I think if you've tried self-care before, starting with this approach of being able to figure out what actual kind of self-care you need is really important. And I think will then make the rest of trying to figure out what to do about self-care a little bit easier. Again, it boils down to what does my body need right now? What do I need right now? Do I need regulation or do I need restoration? To help you begin to get more specific about the different kinds of things that you can do for self-care, I want to go through the 6 areas that I believe in terms of self-care. So we're going to go through them and go through a few examples of each one, just so again, the idea here is we're opening up your portfolio and you're going to take whatever ones that seem like they might be interesting to you. You do not have to even consider doing all of these. That would be insane. I don't even do that. And I spend time on self-care more than most people do, right? It's really about finding these options that work for you. So if you want something that is restorative, if you feel like you need an infusion, right? Restorative, then maybe it's eating something nourishing. It's in this physical area. You need something nourishing. Or maybe you need to get rest, or maybe you need to be planning something that's going to get you excited, right? So you can look at these different areas of self-care, and they can even be broken down into regulation and restoration. So physical things like stretching. Stretching is a really good self-care activity. One, because it's good for your body, obviously, but also if you count the seconds while you're stretching, there's a real meditative quality to that as well, which helps focus your brain, which allows the rest of your brain to kind of, how many times have I done that tonight? It feels really good every time I do it, right? So stretching has these benefits. Eating, taking medications that you need, getting rest that you need. Taking breaks during the day sometimes can be helpful. 5 to 10 minutes of just sitting down can help you just, right? So there's cognitive components to it, right? Reframing a thought. If you have a negative thought or a like an inner critic thought, maybe you can reframe the thought. I mentioned doing a puzzle before, clearing out mental clutter, things that are just piling up in terms of worry. If you feel like you've got too much stuff going on, maybe it's really just taking a step back, picking one thing, and just saying, okay, let me see if I can figure this out. Everything else is going to wait until I take care of this first. Emotional, right? When you need to be able to really express some feelings, things like journaling, crying, and not feeling badly or shameful about it, talking to someone that you feel really comfortable with, practicing self-compassion. I cannot stress that enough. I have a whole workshop on self-compassion. I will be talking about self-compassion a lot next week. If you come to another one of my workshops, you'll hear me also talk about self-compassion. It's just that important. So the fourth area is relational. So this is where we're using our connections with other people to be able to address some of our self-care needs. So texting a friend, particularly if you're feeling lonely or isolated, joining a community group so that you can feel more connections with people. Maybe sometimes we just have to ask for help. Sometimes we just need to get out of the house and do some sort of event. Doesn't have to be like for the purposes of meeting somebody, but just for the purposes of doing something that's outside of our home where we've been spending maybe too much time. Environmental, this also includes a kind of nature component. So whether that's opening a window, whether it's looking at the environment in which we're living. I've talked in the past about I used to live in a house where in my bedroom, I had a corner that would just always get piled up with stuff. And I never really thought about it. But finally, one weekend, I was like, oh, I'm finally gonna clean this up. I cleaned it up. When I went to bed that night, I felt so much better. I didn't even realize that it was weighing on me. So even little things like that can help make a difference. Reducing noise and light, like I find particularly uh, when I'm in need of more intensive self-care, that maybe sometimes the music is too loud or too soft, that materials don't feel quite right, light might be strange for me. So even just making minor adjustments like that can relieve some of the stress that we're experiencing. And then you've heard me talk about it already many times, but going outside, finding nature, just getting that experience is so powerful. And then there's a protective area also. And maybe that's setting a boundary. It's saying no when you don't want to see someone, or saying no when someone asks you to do something else that you're just not ready to do right now. Maybe it's assessing your calendar and figuring out these 5 things I totally want to do and they're worth the time and energy. These 3 things are not. And I'm going to say no to them, or I'm going to postpone them to another time. Also thinking about what do you need in terms of, like, do you need to advocate for yourself in certain situations in your life? This is one of those areas where that would come into play. I hope that by looking at this, that just by going through this short list that you get a sense that maybe you're already doing some of these things for yourself. So you're already doing some self-care activities, which is great. Now, what I'm going to challenge you to do is one, start to really think about them as self-care, right? Do it with more intention and do them with more consistency, right? So find times during the day that you can add some more of these activities because it's going to help you manage yourself and feel better. So let's get back into talking about your self-care portfolio, and I'm going to have a drink. Thank you for giving me that second for self-care. The reason I say that you need multiple options, like it's easy to think about, oh, I need self-care. Here's the one thing I do for self-care. But the thing is, not everything is going to work every time, but something will work every time, right? So, what I want you to have is an array, a portfolio of options, so that if the first one or the second one doesn't really seem to be doing something today, you have other options to choose from that may work for you. You're going to find something that works if you have an array of options. If you only have one, there are going to be times where it's not as effective for you, and then you're going to be really struggling. So there's kind of three things here, right? One is they're quick practices. These are the things that I've been talking mostly about. I think of them as like station stops. These are these pauses during the day that you can do that are, 30 seconds, a couple minutes, whatever it is, really not time that you'll ever miss, but time that would immensely benefit you, right? They talk about them as micro care moments. And so that's breathing exercises, grounding exercises, that's acts of compassion for yourself. That is, playing a word game for 3 or 4 minutes and just allowing your body to slow down a little bit. Those kinds of things, right? So you want those types of practices. You want the deeper practices. These are the ones that really get into like actual time, 20, 60 minutes, whatever it is. That's the journaling, that's exercising, that's nature walks. That's also creative projects, thinking about things like that. Doing something creative, if that's the way you are, like I can't really create things artistically, but people who can, this is an incredibly powerful tool to be able to care for yourself. It helps you express emotions. It helps you process things. It's incredibly meditative. There's so many benefits to doing something like that. And that's whether it's creating music, whether it's drawing, painting, arts and crafts, pottery, it doesn't matter. It's the act of doing it that makes a difference. And then, just as I was talking about earlier, you want practices that you can use for different situations, right? Just because you need self-care doesn't mean you feel the same way each time, right? Today, I didn't feel anxious, but I have self-care activities I do when I'm anxious. Today, I felt really focused on like depleted and that I wanted to get myself ready for doing this workshop. And so I went to the water and I found nature and I enjoyed the moving around and interacting with the city here. So that's what I want you to be able to have things that you can choose from for different mental states that you might be experiencing. And I- I'm I'm throwing a lot of different options at you, but again, I'm not expecting you to do all of them tonight and tomorrow, right? Start small. Just pick a couple and see how you feel. And then once you get used to those or you realize that you don't like those, then try some more. And then just keep building this portfolio so that you have this steady process of caring for yourself on a daily basis. And I think you'll find that just living life a bit lighter is really living life easier. And you deserve that. And there's no question. So let's go through some really specific practices that you can actually do. Okay. One really big one, and I'll be honest with you, this is not one I'm good at. And so I tend not to do it. But it is a really valuable one, and it can really help you be more connected to what you need. And so that's why I want to talk about it. Essentially, the art of checking in. What we'll do is we'll take a few moments. We're going to kind of breathe in and out a couple times. And then you can close your eyes, you can keep them open, whatever you feel comfortable with. And we want to assess a few things. One, we want to assess physical sensations. Do you feel physical tension in your body somewhere? Is your shoulders tense? Is your neck tense? Do you feel something in your stomach, in your back? So you want to kind of get that feel. You want to do an assessment of your emotions. Do you feel emotions like bubbling up? Do you feel like just a numbness, a flatness? Do you feel a disconnect? Kind of just trying to figure that out. Do you feel your emotions in a particular area of your body? Like, for a lot of people, anxiety you can feel that in your stomach or in your chest. So things like that. Another thing to think about is like mental fog, right? So today, again, good example, my brain was kind of wiped, right? And I didn't want to do this workshop in that mental state. I didn't do the this check-in because I knew right off the bat my brain was foggy. But this kind of checking can really help you tell that, right? Are you like slower to think of things? Is it feel a little bit harder maybe to come up with solutions to problems? Those could be simple signs that your just brain is a little fatigued. And so that is something that you can learn on this check-in. And then also if you're feeling exhaustion despite the fact that you get rest. So if you're sleeping, but it never feels like enough, that probably is a sign that your body is just being worn out and your brain is being worn out from all of the weights that you're carrying. So I know that sounds like a lot, but let's take a moment now. Just let's focus really on the physical sensations. If you can notice some of the other stuff, great. But for right now, let's focus on the physical sensations. I want you to take a deep breath in and let it out. Let's do that one more time. Deep breath in and let it out. One more time. Deep breath in, let it out. As you're exhaling, try to just move through your body. Start from your head, the top of your head. And as you sort of notice your head, like, does your head hurt? Do you feel pressure somewhere? Are you notice anything in your sinuses? As you go down the back of your neck, do you feel some tension, some pressure, any discomfort anywhere? Just slowly move through your body, just sort of assessing how it feels. And if there's anything that it's trying to tell you. Move through your shoulders, your arms, feel your fingers, through your chest, your stomach, down your legs. You're holding any tension in your back. I tend to hold tension in my legs, so that's a place I always need to check. In your ankles, how are your feet feeling, your toes? And when you've gone through that, take another deep breath, let it out, and just sort of open your eyes slowly. And what did you kind of experience from that? What did you feel? Could you tell that there were some reactions that you were having? Because that's how you start to really build this body mind connection and this awareness of like, oh, wait a second, I am having tension in my shoulders. Maybe I need to do something that's going to help regulate me a little bit. Maybe I need to do more breathing exercises to relax my muscles. So this is a really good tool for helping you begin to not just build that connection, but be able to notice when things start to feel a little bit off instead of waiting until it's so heavy that you can't deal with it anymore. So I'm just taking a look at the questions. Ah, so Sandy asks a great question. And I'm really glad you asked that, Sandy. I was going to go into that and cut that out because my workshop was getting too long. So good job. I feel like we could have teamed up on this really well. So let's talk about her question. Her question is, how do you differentiate between what is a practice of self-care and what is avoidance? And so she asked specifically, like, what about watching TV or a movie or scrolling the internet? It's such a great question. It's a tough answer. Most people won't like this answer, but uh, I think it's important to understand there is a time and a place where watching TV is just like what we need, right? I don't know if it ever really constitutes as self-care. It's not something that infuses us. There's no restoration that goes on. And there tends not to be regulation that goes on either, right? It's not something that helps calm us down. It it does allow us to not really think about stuff, and that's can be helpful. But once we start doing it for an extended period of time, it's lulling us, right? It's distracting us. It's not giving us something that we might need. And that's not to say like watching TV is bad or anything like that. We don't need to have that discussion. But what Sandy's talking about is the distinction between um sorry, Sandy, if implied that you weren't. I'm sorry. Um so uh I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, so Sandy asked about the practice and avoidance. So if it is something where when you're finished doing it, you have a tendency to feel the same as you did when you started it. Most likely it's avoidance, right? So scrolling social media is a really good example. And scrolling social media is a really good example, right? I'll scroll social media and like 20 minutes later, I'm just like, what the heck am I doing? I do not feel any better than I did when I started this, but now my day is less. My day is shorter because of this, right? It's really a matter of being able to notice, is it benefiting me or is it not? Often what we do is we do things that distract us. They're really easy to do. These apps, right? The social media apps, things like that, they're built to distract us, to suck us in so that we don't think about doing something else. That's really how they make their money, right? Is by getting us to watch it as much as possible. So, but when you do scroll through the internet and you don't feel better afterwards, that's because it's not really a self-care activity, it's a distraction. And there is a time and a place for distraction, no question. But when we're talking about something that's good for you in terms of your mental health and in terms of regulation and restoration, then we really want to think about what is it giving you? What are you getting from the experience? And when that experience is over, when that activity is over, do you feel better? And if you do, then we can count that as self-care. Absolutely. If you can structure your social media algorithms to be things that are really positive for you, and you can do that for 10 or 15 minutes, you're probably going to feel better afterwards. But if it's like most social media and it's just lots of stuff and you're scrolling through it and it's half an hour later, you're probably not feeling better, but at least you weren't thinking about what you're thinking about. But that isn't self-care. So, Sandy, I hope that helps answer your question. The key again being we want our self-care activities to one, be focused on regulation and restoration, Two, we want to feel better when that activity is over. And often a distraction doesn't do that. So that was the check-in. Let's do breathing. So this is, this starts similar to what we were doing, but what we're really doing here is two things. One, just breathing helps slow us down. We're taking a break. But more importantly, whenever we breathe and exhale longer than inhale, we're telling our nervous system, we're telling our amygdala, the fight or flight controller, right? We're saying, hey, the danger is over. We're safe. And so that's why I like this kind of breathing. It doesn't have to be 5/7 breathing, 5/7 being breathe in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 7 seconds. It could be 4/6, it could be 3/5, it could be 2/4, whatever you want to do. The key is breathing out longer than you breathe in. That's the signal that tells your brain it's okay to calm down. So let's do a few of these together. Uh, so again, you can open your eyes, close your eyes, whatever you want. We're going to breathe in for 5. We're going to exhale for 7. I'm going to let you do the counting yourself. I feel like you've probably reached that point in your life where you can count on your own. And so uh, let's try 5 breaths. Breathe in for 5, breathe out for 7, 5 times. I know it says 10, but let's say 5 times and just see how you feel. So, okay, breathe in. Okay. How did that feel? I hope that felt good for everybody. I saw some people talking about other breathing exercises that they do. Again, this is what I mean. Like, if you have another breathing exercise that you like, then you can do that. That's totally fine. The main reason I like this one is because the exhaling longer helps turn off the fight or flight, but any breathing exercise is going to help calm you down. And that's what we need the most. This one is going to focus on grounding. So again, this is a regulation activity. It's a lot easier to demonstrate regulation activities. Also, I tend to find that people who, sorry, let me rephrase that, that most people struggle with regulation because we live in this just chaotic, high energy, go, go, go kind of society. And so these are better activities to help for that regulation process. So just so you know, so this is a grounding exercise. You may have heard of it as like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But again, as with everything, there isn't a right way to do it. So the goal here is to use things in your present to ground yourself in the moment. Often when we're activated, there are parts of us that feel like we're back in the past. There are parts of us that feel like we're in a place that isn't safe anymore. By grounding ourselves to what's around us, we're centering ourselves in the present, and it helps remind us, oh, we're an adult again, right? We can handle this situation. We're in a safe place right now. So if you want to do it as 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste, absolutely you can. If you want to do 10 things that you see and that's enough for you, that's also fine. It it's the act of doing it And if it helps you feel grounded, then awesome, right? So this one I don't think we need to do together. I think it's something that you can probably do pretty easily on your own. But I wanted you to have this so that you have it as a reference. Again, I'll be sending the slide deck around tomorrow. So you'll have this, you don't have to worry about writing it down or anything like that. And then this is another microcare moment. This is also kind of a self-compassion exercise, and which is also why I like it. And so this one we can do together because it's just so simple, but it seems so strange. We don't, we're often very hard on ourselves. And when we're agitated and overactivated, being hard on ourselves makes us feel more at risk. It heightens our sense of danger when we already feel that danger. So if we can pause that inner critic and be able to say, okay, I'm okay. I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying. I'm doing a good job. And we can do that in a way that involves some affection for ourselves. It's going to have an even stronger impact. So what I suggest, and this is the hand on heart exercise. Put your hand on your heart. Just feel it. You can feel it beating if you can. At least feel the warmth of your hand. That can be just a nice feeling in and of itself. We're going to take a few breaths, and then you can either repeat what I say or you can say something similar for yourself. So, hand on your heart, we're going to take 3 slow breaths. 1, 2, 3. I'm okay right now. I'm safe. I can handle this. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And take one more breath. And that is a beautiful and gentle act of self-compassion for yourself. I think you can feel the regulation aspect of it, but it's also just so reassuring and comforting. So, what I want you to think about as we move to the end of the workshop, and I know I'm running a little bit late tonight, I want you to essentially think about adding layers of self-care. So, I mentioned earlier thinking about stretching while brushing your teeth. I have tight calves. For some reason, I frequently forget to stretch them. But I remember to stretch them when I'm brushing my teeth. So I've combined those two activities together. So I'm getting the self-care of the stretch. I'm focusing on the counting of the seconds of the stretch, which has that meditative quality to it. And that is helping me feel better as I get ready to go to bed at night. When you're waiting online for something or having to just like stuck somewhere for a moment waiting, practice breathing exercises. If you're doing an activity, whether it's cleaning or cooking or something else, and you can listen to music that's soothing for you or that makes you feel good or infuses you with good energy, go ahead. If you can incorporate activities that help ground you during the day in between the chaos that you're experiencing, that will make it just a little bit easier at night for you to be able to wind down as well and be able to get some sleep. Again, the focus is on being more intentional with the way that you care for yourself. And that's really what I want for you tonight. Obviously, you don't have to do this, but if you'd like to get started, there are like 3 different kinds of check-ins that you can do, right? You can do something in the morning. You can do a check-in when you first wake up, just a sense of like whether you want to do the body scan, whether you want to just do an assessment of how you're feeling. You can do that. You can also just sort of ask yourself, well, what do I need right now? What do I need today? And not the like, what do I need to accomplish, but what do I need to be okay today? What do I need to feel safe today? And then what's a self-care activity that would help you get one of those things that you need? Adding care throughout the day, right? That's those what I call station stops, these moments, transitions during the day from one activity to another. How do you add a care layer to that, right? When you finish a meeting, do a breathing exercise before you start the next meeting. At lunch, maybe you just don't eat at your desk, you take a little walk. If it's freezing outside, go walk around somewhere in another building or something, right? Anything to just move and get some space. And then in the evening, do another check-in. Maybe think about a grounding or calming exercise at night to help you fall asleep. But this is just like a beginning level that you can start with if you want to, and then add more as you want. I just want to remind you that the reason life feels so heavy and so draining is because you're carrying too much. And I don't say that because there's something wrong with you. I'm saying that's the way our life is right now. We're all carrying too much. And the way to help yourself, the way to lighten your load is through self-care. And I hope tonight really helped you begin to see that not only is self-care something really valuable and helpful, but also something that you can easily start to do tonight. Thank you very much. I'm wrapping up. I know there are a couple of questions. If there are other questions that you want to ask that I didn't get to, please put them in the Q&A and I will go back to them. Um, if you liked the workshop, I really hope you'll take some time and review it. Uh, it means a lot to me. I look at all the reviews. I'm always touched by them, but also I'm finding that it helps other people find these workshops more easily. And one of the reasons that I keep these workshops free is because I want to be able to help as many people as I can. So I think that would be great if you wouldn't mind doing that. If you came through Eventbrite, I don't have as much of a community in Eventbrite. The community really is in Meetup. So if you want to join the Meetup, you're welcome to do that as well. There'll be information on how to do that. So there are a few ways that you can continue to connect with me and that maybe hopefully I can continue to help you in your healing journey. Certainly, I'm doing some more workshops. Most of them are free. Again, most of the workshops I do are free. So next week, I'm doing 2 keys to healing, self-awareness and self-compassion. It's really going to focus on self-awareness and infusing the process of self-awareness with self-compassion. For some of you, and I will send a note around about this early next week, but I might need a volunteer or two because I'm going to try and do something completely new next week for this workshop. If you want to volunteer for that, just let me know. It just involves asking me questions, but I won't know the questions ahead of time. We'll just make sure that they're appropriate questions. Then in 2 weeks, I'm starting something that is very new for me, which is a series of workshops revolving around my book in my memoir, In My Rearview Mirror. So what I'll be doing is taking snippets from the book. I'll read for a few minutes, and then I'll be using that as a jumping off point to cover what I think is a really important topic and do the workshop around that. So it's a similar workshop structure, but we're going to start with a reading from my book and then using me as an example of like what happened and how to process it and deal with it. I think that because of the work I've done and what I've been through, I can maybe help you see things in a more kind of real world kind of way than in a theoretical kind of way, abstract kind of way. So that's a big part of what these workshops are about. That one is in 2 weeks. In 3 weeks, I'm starting a new kind of meeting as well. And this is what I'm calling the integration circle. And what I want to do is really help you be able to move forward with, I learned this in the workshop, but applying it to my life is really hard. Now, you can hire me as a coach and I'll give you that option as well, but maybe as an interim before that, just to see if this stuff works for you. I had the idea of we have this group where we'll all get together. I'm charging $7. It's a small amount, but what it does is like we had over 100 people at tonight's workshop. That's a lot for having a kind of uh, meeting like I'm talking about. So by charging $7, we'll reduce the amount of people. It'll mean that the people that are there are more invested in actually doing the work and really making some progress. And then we'll talk about kind of what you've done with the workshops, like what you've done with the things you've learned from these workshops in the past month or so, or even historical ones. And then you can ask me any questions you want. I will answer them to the best of my abilities. We'll have a really fun experience. I'll give you other examples to think about. I really want this to be like the way that you begin to get more practical with the things that you've learned from the workshops, apply them to your life, get some of those questions answered so that you can even make more progress. And then first week of February, we start the process, the cycle over again of these workshops. We'll be going back to these regular, what I call build on your strengths workshops. It'll be on turn off the alarm, practical ways to manage your fight or flight mode. You can tell that's going to be a big one. I talked about that a lot tonight. Um, this is the information on my meetup community. I also want you to know that a lot of you probably work for places that may very well care about their employees' mental health, but aren't sure what to do about that. I do these kinds of workshops at companies, and I love it, and I customize them to what's actually maybe some of the issues that they're dealing with in that culture. So I give the employees access to all of my workbooks and workshop recordings and things like that. So if that's something that you're interested in, please reach out to me, connect me with someone that you work with in your HR department, and I'll be happy to do that and bring that over to you. There are a couple ways more to connect with me. I have a Facebook group and a Facebook page you can follow. I write articles regularly. I post those on LinkedIn and Substack, so you can check those out. I have free mental health guides. There's 3 of them. They're free, so you can have them, download them, check them out, see if they're helpful to you. If you're thinking that maybe you want to explore the idea of working with me as a coach, then I have something that's called a clarity call. It's a free 30-minute call. It's essentially a mini session. You get a feel for how I work. We'll talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. And when it's over, I won't even ask you to schedule the appointment. What I will do is I'll send you an email with my coaching agreement so that you can read that over on your own time. If you have any questions, you can let me know. I'll send you the link to schedule. And if you choose to do so, then you can. And if you don't want to, there's absolutely no pressure whatsoever. I hope that you get the sense that, like, that is just not my vibe. I'm not into pressuring you. And so that's how you do it. And if that's something that you want to do, go ahead, schedule that. That's no problem. I have something called Strength Studios, which is where you can get access to all of my workshops, my older workshops, all of my workbooks that I've created, other bundles I've put together, things like that. I'm offering a January discount code, which is not surprisingly care for me, and not as the me, but you. And so um, that'll give you 25% off. And if you want to check that out, there's a whole workbook, a whole bundle on the art of sleep, getting more restful sleep. That is $27 before the 25% discount. So for those of you that are good with math, I'll let you handle that. Uh, Coaching, I do individual coaching. I also do sessions. I've started doing these more intensive sessions. So where we'll do either half a day or a full day, where it's you and me, and we focus this time and we figure out ahead of time what we want to really cover. And then we'll get into real specifics as well as exercises you can do, practical tips, all of that. And so obviously that's a really intense, but I'm finding that certainly some people really benefit from that. And that's it. And so now let me just take a quick review at the questions. I don't think there were many that came in, but let me take a look. I'm just going to leave us at the workshops so you know what's coming up next. Um, so someone said, oh, that someone is overwhelmed with loneliness. And so okay, Eric, let's talk about that a little bit. Eric talked about being overwhelmed with loneliness and having spent so much time on external validation. And that can be really challenging for obvious reasons and usually a sign that, there were situations in which you were growing up where that was an adaptation that you learned to do because that was the way for you to survive. The reason I think self-care is going to be so helpful to you right now is because partly that's what you're crying out for. Self-care gives us the opportunity to treat ourselves the way we didn't get treated when we were growing up. For those of us that had difficult childhoods, it's a very healing experience to actually realize, hey, wait a second, I can manage my own care for myself. I'm not dependent on someone else, right? That's the way we grew up. We grew up believing that someone else had to care for us, had to give us that care, that compassion, that love and affection that we desperately needed. And we've spent our lives believing that. But in reality, we now can do this for ourselves. That's the real beauty of the healing process and why self-care is such an important component. So don't try to tackle the whole problem all at once. That's my suggestion. I would start with self-care, particularly as it relates to self-compassionate self-care, because you want to help convince your nervous system that you can be what you've always needed. And the truth is, you can. It's just not something you've done yet. And so, as you get more comfortable with that, your nervous system is going to start to realize, oh, wait a second, he actually is taking care of me. He is handling this. He's dealing with these situations. And you'll start to realize that that need for external validation will become less because you are already validating yourself. You just didn't know that you were allowed to do that. I hope that helps a little bit. And if you want to talk more about that, Eric, you can please feel free to reach out. Callie talks about being pretty isolated and that her therapist suggested turning to social media can stem from a desire to find connection. Yes, I think that's absolutely true. I think there is that distraction component, but there is a sense of when you're on social media of kind of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And when you're dealing with loneliness and isolation, having that sense of being a part of something feels really good. The problem is that when it's over, right, when we turn off that app, close that app, right, we're still left with that feeling of loneliness and isolation. It doesn't resolve that problem. It just kind of helps us forget about it for a little bit. And so that's where I come back to like that fundamental question of like, what do I need now? Right? Like I've been through a stretch lately. For those of you that have been kind of following my life a bit, right? I moved from New York, where I lived for about 30 years, to Florida, and I was there for 6 months, and I didn't know anybody. So it was very lonely and difficult. And I really had to spend a lot of time focusing on self-care that helped me feel less lonely and or understood where that loneliness was coming from and why it was affecting me so much. So I I think like so to answer your question, yes, I completely agree. The problem is it just doesn't actually help. It just feels like it helps for that moment. But that something like self-care is going to be a longer lasting um salve, like the kind of lotion or ointment you put on yourself to heal a wound. Like self-care is going to be more of that kind of treatment for yourself. It's going to have a better benefit and it's going to be longer lasting. Katie asks if I take health insurance. I do not take health insurance. But uh, if you need some adjustment to the my fee, then just reach out to me and we can have a conversation about that. So I think those are all the questions for today. If anyone else has a question, you can just fling it up there real quick. Otherwise, I will say thank you very much. I'm so glad that you joined me today. It's good to start the year off with you and get focused on the kinds of things that really gonna help make 2026 a good year for us all. Again, always feel free to reach out. I will post the link to the recording and the slide deck and other resources tomorrow in the meetup group. And I hope to see you next week. Okay. Take care, everybody.